So, want to, as they say, get real. What's important to you? What matters to you? What is that thing that is the top priority for you? Because that question, or the way that we answer that question, can help shed light on how we see God and how we see God in our lives. And that question then leads naturally to, is our priority, is what's important to us, what's important to God? Our gospel lesson this morning is about how people see other people. John thought that people needed to follow Jesus the same way he was following Jesus. And in this case, he was physically walking along the path with the living Lord. Jesus quickly disabused him of this misconception and tried to offer a broader view. Sometimes a biblical lesson can carry its own weight and is very clear. But sometimes when we try to just leave it at the clear message, not everybody has to do the same thing you're doing to be right, it can get lost. And so my mind will go to a story, and I'm a big fan of short stories, and one that came to mind with this passage, actually many years ago, was Leo Tolstoy's story, The Death of Ivan Ilých. And that story seems to carry the weight of this message quite well. Perhaps even better than me just saying that we need to make sure that we're looking at the world in the same way God is. In this story, Ivan, the main character, who the title sort of gives away the end, will die. Ivan is a high court judge in 19th century Russia. And Tolstoy depicts him in a number of ways, sort of diagrams this character. He's a not-so-great husband, but a proud father and an upwardly mobile member of Russia's professional class. And this is a group that was a prime target for Tolstoy. Ivan lived what appeared to be a good life. He had an important position in the Department of Justice and what he considered to be a wonderful and prestigious home. In fact, he had just bought this home and was very proud of it. And the whole notion of prestige is interesting. We encounter that all the time. What we value and what we think other people value and will see and find value in us. So for Ivan, this is the one thing that was so important to us. He, Tolstoy writes, was attracted to people of high station, assimilating their views and their ways. That's what he worked for. Not unlike our unwitting disciples, who just a few verses earlier in Mark 9, were arguing about who is the greatest. Which one of us is going to be the greatest in the kingdom? Only to have Jesus throw out that paradoxical phrase, whoever wants to be first must be last and servant of all. That's Mark 9:37, just before our reading began. So Ivan, as he was fitting out this new home, took a very hands-on approach. And one day he was watching the decorator try to hang some drapes, and he kept saying, not this way, not that way, move it over here. And finally he climbed up the ladder to show, this is how I want it done. And as he was coming down the ladder, he bought these new drapes, not because the old ones were worn out, but because they were auspicious and because they were new, and everyone would then know that he had new drapes. So he was coming down the ladder and he missed one of the rungs, as is so easy to do on a ladder, and he slipped. But he was even impressed with himself and his athletic prowess and the way he landed. He stuck the landing. He did bang his side on a window latch on the way down, but he didn't think anybody saw it. He left quite a bruise, though. And a few weeks later, he realized the pain from this pesky bruise in his side wasn't going away. And then sometime later, he developed a strange taste in his mouth. He called on expensive celebrity doctors to come, but no one could really explain his condition. And then it became clear that he was dying. He kept getting worse and worse. The frustrating thing about seeing someone like Ivan go through the pain and struggle of facing his own death is that he really wasn't a bad person. Tolstoy took pains to show that he wasn't bad or evil. He was an ethical attorney. He was a good citizen, an enjoyable friend, an adequate provider, and a fair and loyal employer of his household staff. He never abused his power, even though, again, Tolstoy makes it clear that Ivan is aware of this. He knew he could. The problem is Ivan's life was built on surface value. No matter what, he kept up appearances and didn't allow anyone into that intimate place of sharing his burdens. In fact, whenever he and his wife would argue, which I think I mentioned, he was not so great a husband, Ivan was happy that no one heard. He could continue gaining prestige and, again, keeping up appearances. However, after he became sick, the life of surface value that he had so carefully built didn't include anyone to share his journey through ill health. His wife and daughter were in their social world and were basically unaware of his struggles. His friends were shallow relations that weren't there for him when it really mattered. There was no one to minister to him in his time of need. Some of his friends even started to tease him in a friendly way about his fear of death. His colleagues, people who he previously would have counted warmly as a part of his circle, began looking at him as a man whose job would soon be available. This lack of compassion from his family and his friends tormented him. It drove him crazy. No one could give him the care he so desperately wanted. Yet that's what he built. That's what he had put together for himself. There was no one except there was one person. The young butler's assistant, Gerasim. Gerasim brought Ivan his food. That was his job. Gerasim took away his chamber pot. That also was his job. Gerasim did it with humility and a cheerful, life-giving disposition. That wasn't part of his job. Sometimes when Ivan was in great pain, and Gerasim realized that if he held his leg up, it would relieve some of the pain. So Gerasim would sit and hold his leg up even late into the night, and that was not part of his job either. The really beautiful part of the story is the way Gerasim did what he did. It was his disposition. It was the expression on his face. It's tough right now with us all in this room wearing masks. We don't get to see one another's full expression. We can see our eyes, but we don't get to really see one another. They weren't wearing masks. And Ivan could see the warmth in Gerasim's face. Ivan apologized for his condition and for all of his needs, and Gerasim just smiled and said, "Why shouldn't I help you? You are a sick man." Ivan was, in the course of this narrative, discovering that power and prestige were not where he thought they were. He had achieved these things, his position, his house, his social status, but when he faced his own mortality, when he faced what what Paul Tillich calls the anxiety of non-being. Ivan realized that power and prestige gave him no comfort. Ivan would have fit in well with those disciples in Mark 9. He saw himself as one of the greatest, or at least climbing the ladder to become one. He would fit in with John, who said, they're not doing it like we're doing it, so they must be wrong. He thought his way and his priorities were the right ones. According to him, everyone else had it wrong. He had this powerful position, was upwardly mobile. What more could anyone ever want? Well, he found out as he faced his death that love, compassion, and comfort were what he wanted. And in this case, a boy named Gerasim, a peasant with no prospects, delivered the messianic goods. He did the mundane tasks like bringing food, and he went above and beyond the call of duty by holding Ivan's legs. Most important, the most significant thing Gerasim did was he was there. He was actually present. Have you ever been around somebody, like physically been with somebody who's not really there? People can be there but not there. Is Val still there? Yeah, she reacted, so she's there. Movies play into that sense. People will, sneak by the guard shack when the guard's so engrossed in a book or a movie or whatever. Maybe you've been reading something before and you've been so into it, and you hear the sound of somebody's voice asking something. Yep. You may have just agreed to something. That actually happened when I was very little. My brother said, let's go ask Dad if he'll take us to see Pete's Dragon. Does anybody remember that Disney movie, Pete's Dragon? And it was probably 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, so he was sound asleep. My parents were sound asleep, and so we went in, and he said, Dad, will you take us to see Pete's Dragon? Yep, Go away, go play. At some point, he must have realized that he had agreed, because we got to go see the matinee later that day. Unlike those here but not here responses, Gerasim carried out these tasks with complete presence. He gave his full attention to Ivan. He was there. And this is the ministry of presence. Jesus responded to the disciples just again before our reading in Mark 9:35 by picking up a child and holding this child in the midst of these disciples who were arguing about who gets to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And I don't know if he was still supposed to be holding this child when he gave them that stern warning in our reading that it was about putting stumbling blocks in front of the little ones. It would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around one's neck. Children had no status in first century Palestine. So it's as if Jesus looked at Ivan's life and said, it's not the power, it's not the big new house, it's not the important job, it's not all the prestige, it's not all the stuff that you've been building up that you think is important. It's the relationships, it's love, it's caring. Let me turn what you know upside down. Whoever wants to be first has got to be last and servant of all. Out of this sense of things are not as they seem, we meet Gerasim, and we get to see what Jesus in the world looks like. And we see it again today. We see it all around us. When people act out in faith, when people live out what they believe, even when people, a body of believers, does something so mundane as offering access to a washer and a dryer. In this story, we see love, caring, compassion, and presence. And it's so easy to miss who we are in a story. It's so easy to miss in the gospel lesson where we fall. As we hear a story like this, we could think about Garrison and think about that time. Oh yeah, I remember when I did that, when I participated, when I lived out my faith. And then we miss all those times in our lives when we fought like crazy to live like Ivan. When we hear about the disciples missing what Jesus was trying to teach, it's easier for us to point out the speck in their eye than to see and deal with the plank in our own. Well, it's no spoiler. It was in the title. At the end, Ivan died. There was no miracle. Just as he expected, his wife was more concerned with the state of their financial affairs than with the loss of her husband. His friends were forlorn that they were down a bridge partner, and his colleagues saw the opportunity to fill a prestigious vacancy. And his servant, Garrison, was sad. Life moved on. But before he died, Ivan experienced compassion, presence, and love, and he saw the face of God in this boy with no prospects, this boy who was destined to this life of service, Garrison. Friends, we get to be the face of God to everyone we encounter. It's an opportunity we have every day of our lives. Amen.